WESN.
Well, a very good morning to you. It's Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022. I'm Andy Johnson. Welcome to it around here. This is how we're going to begin this morning. It's AM Prime on this Wednesday morning. Let's tell you what's happening this morning. Richard Amplia, he's the director of the UN AIDS Multi-Country Office, and he's based in Jamaica, talking about some setbacks regarding data on HIV and strategies to accelerate progress against that virus. We get that in the second hour of the program. Of course, we have the Newsday poll this morning, the question and answers, as a matter of fact. We're also talking with Sule Joseph. He's a psychologist around here. He runs this program called Psych. And he's talking with us this morning about trauma management. Right now with us, however, we must not be requesting, we must demand reparations. That's the ringing sort of declaration delivered on Monday's celebrations of emancipation activities in Trinidad and Tobago. The person doing that, making that call, Shabaka Campbell, founder and director of the organization called the Caribbean Freedom Project. He's with us. Let's get behind that. Good morning, good to see you.
All right, good morning, Andy. Thanks for having me.
All right, go ahead.
Yes. Go ahead, Andy, yes.
All right, so you say we must demand, let's start with that. You say we must demand, we must stop requesting, we must demand reparations. What do you mean by that? How do we go about demanding it? What form?
Right, so first of all, what I was reacting to when I made that statement is a comment by or one aspect of the Honorable Minister of National Security's speech, in which he indicated to the crowd there present on Emancipation Morning that the Prime Minister had written to Prince Charles and Prince William, or Prince Harry and Prince William, which is how he stated it, on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago to ask for reparations. That's what I was called to respond to, and of course, you know, I'm well aware that, first of all, the princes don't have the authority to do anything in this regard anymore. That's something that is, you know, long gone. That feudal system where they would have had the authority to make that kind of input. And also, we in the Caribbean have long moved on from asking, you know, the royal family to influence the British government to do what is correct. We have set up a commission, a CARICOM commission for some years now, led by the leading historical luminary in the region, Sir Hilary Beckles, and we are demanding reparations on the basis of knowledge. And so there's a reparation center out of Jamaica, where we are pulling together the historical truth, which forms the substance and basis on which we demand reparations. Also, the whole thrust of the discussion has moved on, way beyond, you know, reaching out to members of the royal family and so on now. And, you know, reparations has begun. There's you know, I think perhaps a lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago don't realize this. When you hear some of the discourse out there on the street, you know, people still talking about, well, is it really, you know, how are we going to seek reparations for something, that crime that took place such a long time ago? And all these kinds of questions keep coming up. What people aren't aware of is that corporations, governments, churches, universities, and so on, all kinds of institutions all across that now are aware, based on the same kind of information and research that we're doing here in the Caribbean, of their role in slavery and the slave trade, are seeking to, in advance of any kind of order from certain governments and so on, to try to advance the reparations question. So reparations is already being paid in the millions of dollars. You have the reparations is being debated at the level of the U.S. Congress. The state of California has already agreed to pay reparations to African Americans in that state. All kinds of moves are afoot now for reparations. It's not a prayer and a dream anymore. It's a reality. And the governments of the Caribbean, all of the English-speaking Caribbean or the Caribbean community, CARICOM, have already unanimously agreed to pursue reparations. They've already set up a reparations commission, a regional reparations commission led by our leading historical luminary, Sir Hilary Beckles, and that thrust is already well underway.
All right, so so here's my concern about it. That was in 2013 when the CARICOM leaders met in Trinidad and Tobago. The decision to do that came from there. And so out of that came the Regional Reparations Commission led by Sir Hilary Beckles, and including the Jamaican historian, prominent figure in it as well, Dr. Vereen Shepherd. So there is the Regional Commission, and then there were these national committees set up, and Trinidad and Tobago had one, and the chairman of that was Ayagoro Ome. The situation is we don't know in Trinidad and Tobago what has become of the National Committee on Reparations in Trinidad and Tobago. Do you know anything about where they're at or what has happened with it?
Well, unfortunately, that commission, or that committee, the local committee, was disbanded under Ayagoro Ome, and I understand that the Prime Minister spoke sometime thereafter to announce that Dr. Heather Cato would be the lead person in the new Reparations Commission or committee that he was setting up here. But since then, we really have not heard anything about it.
Yeah,
and so
she was a member of the original committee, and then she became the chair. And I think Dr. Claudius Fergus used to come to some meetings from what I remember, because given where I was in the system at the time, I was a member of it. And there was a meeting in Antigua in which a lot of about a year later, there was this meeting in Antigua in which a lot of the memberships of the national committees had met. And then there was a conference in New York that I went to. People came from different parts of the world, and one of the things they celebrated was the fact that the Caribbean Commission was set up, was a decision taken by government, and you had people from the French territories in different parts of the world who would come to that meeting in New York, saying that it was such a great thing that governments were lining up behind this question, the call for reparations and so on, when in fact...
Yeah, well, no doubt, I want to say this, there is no doubt in my mind that a lot of the things that are happening right now, the fact that Europe is returning stolen artifacts to Africa as part of the reparations thing, that this thing is being debated at the level of the U.S. Congress and so on. There's no doubt that our initiative here in the English-speaking Caribbean is our action is part of the initiative that gave energy to all those things. We are there as we were at the beginning of the 19th century with Henry Sylvester Williams organizing the first Pan-African Conference. Trinidad and the rest of the English-speaking Caribbean is right there at the center of things that are happening right now. Again, this is why, for me, the comments on Emancipation Day were a bit strange. The reason for the local committees is precisely because there's an understanding at the level of CARICOM that the people of the Caribbean have suffered so much brutality, not just physical brutality, but what we call epistemic brutality. That is violence enacted on or through knowledge. That they are in a position now where if you were to offer them reparations, so many people in the Caribbean might refuse it because they would ask why. They have been taught, for example, in Trinidad, that slavery was a very short period and it was relatively benign. There was no issue there. And 50 years after it began, there was emancipation, and then everybody was happy, and it was one big happy family. This is the history we've been taught. No Trinidadian has ever seen an implement of slavery, nor can they tell you where you could go to find one of the violence of slavery, I mean. So no whips and all the other artifacts of torture that were so common in Trinidad. All those things have been removed from our sight. The way that colonialism or imperialism organized itself is that we were not supposed to come into contact with knowledge of its violence in a visible, tangible, or godforsaken educational way. And so the commission recognized the way that colonialism positioned itself in our minds. Bob Marley talked about mental slavery. And so they set up these local committees to begin to conscientize the people. And part of that conscientization, of course, was recognition that the epistemic violence of colonialism was not just in our textbooks, and of course that is central to the whole thing, but it was also in our public spaces. And so they took the colonial heroes, the people that they were giving us as heroes in our textbooks, starting with Columbus, and they planted visible signs of them across the city for those people who didn't get the information from the textbook, or to reinforce the miseducation that was said in the textbook. They gave us heroes like Picton, Woodford, Columbus, Churchill, etc. Of course, Churchill came a little later on in the colonial period, but they gave us the icons of native genocide, slavery, indentureship, and the apartheid that followed up until 1962, up until independence, and even to some extent up to today.
Okay, so really want to try and get at. So there was this decision taken at the regional level. You have this regional reparations commission set up, and they had issued a 10-point agenda calling for such things as a full formal apology, repatriation of those people who want to opt to go back to live in Africa, a program for indigenous people's development, and you know, the setting up of cultural institutions, and it goes down the list, ending with this call for debt cancellation. What do you make of the fact that, so this is a regional agenda, but that each country in the Caribbean, you know, is setting about, as it was setting out with its own sort of, in your case, a request, and you're saying that we should continue to make demands and not make requests. How do you think that the individual approaches to this issue, such as the letter from the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and perhaps other leaders across the region, will have an impact on what should be a regional approach to this thing?
The only way I could see the letter having any impact is from the point of view of something I call corridor diplomacy. You know, although it was a public letter and so on, it just doesn't seem to, that doesn't seem to fit. What I can say is that the Prime Minister made a more recent statement, which was aired last night on the news, where he spoke with a much greater depth of understanding of the issues around reparations, and much clearer about what needs to be done. And so I think that the point is that the time for, individual countries or leaders to be pleading with the royal family for them to use their influence or their good offices in this issue is long gone. This issue has gone way beyond that now at the level of CARICOM and many other parts of the world, and we have to operate within that context. We need to get that reparations committee that was supposed to, or the local commission, the local aspect of the commission, back up and running. We need to follow the resolution of CARICOM from 2017, which called for the removal of all monuments, signs, symbols, etc., to those who were involved in native genocide, slavery, indentureship, and apartheid, to be removed from our public spaces. We need to work with that commission, the things that have come out of that commission, and to move this dialogue forward in a constructive way.
Precisely, they're talking about such issues as they say that we've been bequeathed, among other things, what is called a public health crisis, and that Europe has a responsibility to participate in addressing it. And there's an illiteracy, again, part of the legacy. And what this commission has called for is what they call illiteracy eradication. And it says, for instance, that there are some countries where it is more endemic and others where it is more deep-seated, such as in Jamaica. and the establishment of what is called an Africa Knowledge Program. The question really is, to what extent the calls by individual leaders among this group will sort of diminish the focus on this is a program for implementation in every, at least, member state of CARICOM, and to what extent do you think that individual requests, as you call them, will sort of diminish the power and the force of this regional approach?
Yeah, well, what you were doing just now was quoting the Prime Minister. In his latest presentation, what he said, he started to speak about the legacy of colonial violence that is affecting what he called the detachment and estrangement of an alienation of young people in Trinidad and Tobago today, speaking about how it's impacting their present and their future. That type of dialogue where he's making that connection between colonial violence and the violence of the present. And let me say that there are something like 8 of the Caribbean countries 8 of the countries in CARICOM region, that is the Caribbean community, are very high up the list of on the top 20 most violent countries in the world, most homicidal countries in the world. We have, and there's a huge connection. When our leaders begin to understand the connection between this reality, which seems so out of sync with a Caribbean paradise, the hellish crime, violence that we live, and the violence of our past, which is the only way to explain that violence, you find that they tend to start to enact the kinds of policies that are necessary to move this discourse forward. So when you look at the Prime Minister's current speech, the one that is there on the internet, you see he starts to sound more like Mia Motley. And Mia Motley there's no accident that the Reparations Commission is thriving in Barbados, and that activities coming out of that commission are well and way advanced as opposed to Trinidad, because it's clear to everybody across the region that Mia understands these issues. Prime Minister Mia understands these issues. So when I hear our own Prime Minister begin to speak in those terms, it signals to me that perhaps this government is now at the stage where they understand the issues and they're ready to confront those issues. And perhaps now we can begin to see them building a better future.
But to some extent, locally we've regressed. There's no sense of the continuation of this national committee.
Well, again, as I said, you're right. That committee was disbanded. The Prime Minister made an announcement indicating that Dr. Cato would lead a new committee or a new commission, but there has not been anything since then. But as I say, the speech that I heard yesterday signals an intention on the part of the authorities, perhaps in that promise that they made, Fitzgerald Hine, on behalf of the Prime Minister, to set up that commission which the Caribbean Freedom Project called for in 2020 to look into all the people and values that we celebrate across the country, and to do what other nations in the
region.
No, not just in region, but in the colonial powers are now recoiling from the people that they foisted on us as heroes. People like Governor Picton, for example, and of course that is all over BBC today. That what has happened to his portrait and his statue and his reputation because of the crimes he committed in Trinidad.
Right. So how do you respond to
7 monuments, 7 streets named after him?
Right. How do you respond to Minister Hines' comment here? I'm quoting from the newspaper, from the Newsday yesterday. We as a government listen to public sentiment. We follow social media. We have open ears and open minds, and it is not new. Well, perhaps what Minister Hines is saying to us is that the government is now tuning into the cries and calls of social media. The best example I could give is that in 2020, we handed the mayor of Port of Spain a petition with over 8,000 signatures calling for the Columbus Monument to be moved from the Brian Lara Promenade to the National Museum. There was a vote in the mayor's office
right? It's in the minutes of his meeting. All the councillors voted to have the monument removed. That should have been a victory for us and the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The mayor vetoed that, and of course, left us in a position to experience international ridicule as a country pursuing reparations for a crime that was initiated by the man who we are openly glorifying. So I think what he's saying to us is, listen, I am listening. The government is beginning to hear the cries of civil society, which perhaps we have ignored in the past.
We're going to have to leave you there, my friend. Thank you very much, Shabaka Kambon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we get to you the Newsday question and the response, other things on the other side, our discussion with Mr. Richard Amplia, Director and the UN AIDS Multi-Country Office. He's based in Jamaica. We're talking about what they see as sort of the setbacks in dealing with the effective eradication of this virus in our midst. Stay with us.
Welcome to the 53rd General Assembly of the Caribbean Broadcasting Union from August 15th to 17th at the Magdalena Grand Beach and Golf Resort in beautiful Tobago. This year's theme, Media and Information Literacy. Tobago is a smaller sister in the twin island republic of Trinidad and Tobago, nestled in the heart of the Southern Caribbean. Enjoy 116 square miles of historical sites and award-winning eco-friendly land and marine spaces, including the magical Nylon Pool. And you're just a ferry away from a Trinidad adventure. Our warm hospitality, rich cuisine, and unique traditions will inspire you to extend your stay. Tranquil Tobago is where the Caribbean connects for the 53rd CBU Assembly. To register and enjoy discounts on Caribbean airline flights, visit www.caribbroadcastunion.org. Come and experience Beyond Ordinary.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Welcome back to the program. In minutes from now, we'll be talking with Mr. Richard Amplia. He's the director for the UNAIDS multi-country office. He's based in Jamaica. We'll get to him in a moment. What we're trying to get behind here is what they say is that millions of lives continue to be at risk as progress against AIDS falters. But before that, let's take a look at what the Newsday question and responses are. And the question is coming out of the discussion we just had with Shabaka Kambon alongside it. What are your thoughts about reparations for slavery? And here are some of the responses. Foolishness, because you would have to start with the Jews asking Egypt, Amerindians asking Spain, and so on. Somebody says that is foolishness. Another response is, I totally agree, because there are so many economic and psychological problems that slavery brought. Mainly after emancipation, there was nothing giving in terms of substance to the former slaves. The only people who got any form of an assistance were the former slave owners who got paid by taxpayers for compensation for quote-unquote lost property. That is why emancipation is still part of our struggle. Another response, if that's the case, shouldn't we all move and leave it for the indigenous? While all the wrongs cannot be corrected, those that can be should be done so. Those are some of the responses to that question in the Newsday. Right now, our guest. Millions of lives at risk as progress against AIDS faltered. It doesn't ring well for a lot of people who thought that we had been in front of the eighth ball, as they say in the United States, on this. And in fact, we are reporting that we are regressing. To help us understand that and to put it in some context, Mr. Richard Amplia. He's based in Jamaica. He's the director of the UNAIDS multi-country office. And I imagine multi-country in terms of the Caribbean. He's based in Jamaica. Good morning, sir. Good to see you.
Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so tell us what we're talking about here. Action to tackle the inequalities during driving HIV is urgently required to end the AIDS pandemic. In the first place, let's give us a sense of what do you think people's response to that will be, given the fact that at least in most of our heads, or in a lot of heads, we thought that we had gone over the bridge with this, and it was sort of going towards smooth sailing, if not smooth sailing. What has happened?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. That's a very important question. Obviously, many people thought that AIDS is over. Unfortunately, COVID has demonstrated that the AIDS is not over, and AIDS is still a huge problem because the world has shifted its attention to other priorities. But what is clear from this Global AIDS report, which is entitled In Danger, it's clear that we still have a big issue and that we have a dual pandemic taking place at this point in time, the AIDS pandemic and then the COVID pandemic. And as we speak, every minute, the lives of a person living with AIDS is lost. And that's a big challenge. Every minute, people are dying because of AIDS. And so the human cost of this disease after over 5 decades, it's a huge toll. And so in 2021, we lost over 650,000 people living with AIDS. And that is why we think we need to really work on this globally. UNAIDS just sounded that alarm at the AIDS conference, the International AIDS Conference in Montreal. And the whole idea is to mobilize and galvanize global leaders, communities to help us address this challenge. As I speak to you this morning, we have over 330,000 Caribbeans living with HIV just last year, and about 14,000 Caribbeans were infected, with HIV. So AIDS is not going anywhere. HIV has not gone anywhere. We had close to 6,000 people dying, about 5,700 people dying of AIDS in the Caribbean alone. These are avoidable deaths. It's occurring more in young people, in key populations, in women, and also men. And these are things that we can address if we put all our effort into addressing what are the key challenges. As we speak, the Caribbean, about 1 in 5 of people living with HIV in the Caribbean doesn't know his or her status. And that is an issue. You know, that is an issue. 3/4 of people in Trinidad and Tobago know their HIV status, but we still have close to 25%, you know, of people living with HIV in Trinidad and Tobago who do not know their HIV status. You know, what is even more scaring for us is the fact that people go and know their HIV status, but then people don't get onto treatment. In 2020, we had close to about only 66% of Trinidad and people from Trinidad and Tobago who knew their HIV status getting onto treatment. The question is, where are the rest? You know, and we have tried to look at why are people not getting onto treatment? Why are people not getting even tested? Why are people not even getting themselves preventing, I mean, from getting HIV in the first place? You know, and it boils down to just one significant factor which we started highlighting, which is the gross inequality that exists. Inequality among men and women, inequality among the rich and the poor. You know, there is urbanization, there's urban poor, and obviously there's also inequalities in relation to human rights, gender-based violence, and the punitive laws under which people have to operate. So the policy environment, if the policy environment is not enabling enough, it becomes difficult. If I am somebody who is a gay, or somebody who is a sex worker, or somebody who injects drug, or a transgender woman, the policy environment doesn't make it easy for me to access services. And so such people go underground, because the law will be chasing you for doing something wrong, you know. But we shouldn't criminalize people, and that is what the United Nations, you know, Joint Program Against AIDS, UNAIDS, is standing for.
Yeah. What do you mean when you say
for the rights of people?
Yeah. What do you mean when you say the policy environment?
The policy and legal environment. Because we have the Bagri law in some of the Caribbean countries, you know, that is it criminalizes sexual orientation, and I'm sure you recently heard about Antigua and Barbuda, where they said that there were some sections of the population who have been discriminated upon because of the law that is there, you know, and these are some of the things that we need to look at in terms of what is it, what laws are there, is it facilitating access to services? You know, if the laws are such that some group of people cannot easily go and have services that will prevent them from getting HIV, or even get tested and get onto treatment, and that is a challenge. So somebody will be living with HIV, afraid of the fact that if people get to know that I am HIV positive, they are no longer going to associate with me, my friends are going to shun me, and this brings mental torture, you know, mental torture. So the mental health of people living with HIV is such that they want to be part of the game, but society is saying you have a disease that is actually treatable, even though it's not curable, it's treatable. But then society is afraid of people living with HIV, and that is where we are, where we are now, simply because people, there are a section of the population that are not having access to services. But I really want to appreciate governments who have really taken the bull by the horn, trying to offer services, ensure that they are the commodities that people need to stay alive. You know, most of the Caribbean countries are buying their own drugs, you know, to treat people. And because we don't have a cure, once you get infected, you have to be on treatment for life. And some governments are doing their best, but we know COVID has hit. And because COVID has hit, there has been a shift in terms of resources. And this is what the report is trying to put across, that governments, we still have a pandemic on our hands. You need to resource the HIV response. Prevention is better than cure, and it is important that we take opportunities to focus on who are the key drivers of the epidemic in our different countries in the Caribbean. What is it that we can do to be able to reach those people who are not accessing the services that are there? And that is why UNAIDS is working with the US government through PEPFAR. Recently, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago had some support from the US government to address issues about HIV, simply because progress is being made, but progress is also stalled somewhere along the line. We could do more than we are currently doing, and that is why this report in danger is trying to highlight concerns of human rights, concerns of women, issues about gender-based violence, and then also who is not getting tested, who is not getting treatment, who is not getting the prevention commodities that are there. What is the point? Because now, as I speak with you, there are drugs that people can take as an injection, that would protect them. People who are HIV negative, but at substantial risks of getting HIV. Those drugs are there. In the AIDS conference, there was an agreement that generics of those drugs can be manufactured by middle and lower income countries, which would help and revolutionize HIV prevention, simply because we have a prevention crisis on our hands. As I speak to you now, in the next 24 hours, we would have close to 38 people in the Caribbean getting infected with HIV. This is unacceptable. We can change the course of this epidemic.
You said what will happen in the next hour?
In the next 24 hours.
Next 24 hours.
Every day.
Yes.
We have close to 38 people in the Caribbean getting infected with HIV.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
And you have close to 16 people dying every day in the Caribbean. These are people who are they have families, who maybe are young, have great potential to contribute to the development of the Caribbean, and it is important for us to look and protect such people. And that is why UNAIDS is sounding the alarm. Our global AIDS response, the Caribbean response, is being knocked off course, and it is important that we get back on track. Getting back on track requires that we create that enabling environment for people, to be able to feel free that, look, there is treatment. If I'm able to avail myself to HIV testing and I'm positive, I can still stay alive rather than keeping quiet and dying of AIDS. Today, in this age, people should not die of AIDS. Why are people still dying of AIDS in the Caribbean?
Yeah, and you think it's a kind of silent storm that continues, and because it's ignored to some extent, because in the early years of it, there was more information about who was infected and who was dying because of it, but somehow all of that has gone underground and been removed off of the front pages and the headlines in the news.
Andy, you hit the nail right on the head. That is why the media is being engaged now. We really need to partner, because the media is deep in terms, people listen, social media, traditional media. How can we leverage these platforms to make people informed, to help people who are living quietly with this disease, that there is hope out there? Access services. Nobody is going to stigmatize you. Let's ensure that we are compassionate to people who have diseases that are not curable. But HIV can be treated. So don't die alone. Don't die in silence. We can do something about it. And most importantly, let's protect our young people from getting infected in the first instance. Let's prevent key populations from getting infected in the first instance, because prevention is better and cheaper than cure. And that is why we really want to work with government. As I speak with you, UNH is working with the National Council on AIDS, and then also the Ministry of Health, to be able to put in a national strategic plan for Trinidad and Tobago, and the HIV policy, which will define the framework within which people can access HIV services, which is very important, you know. So that is an active engagement.
That is an active engagement as we speak with agencies and individuals in the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
Exactly. And basically, we want to start that process this year. You know, start the process this year. We help in evaluating the HIV program for Trinidad and Tobago. The sub-regional office of UNAIDS did that, and so we are continuing with this effort in terms of putting in place a strategic plan which clearly defines what we need to do in order to change the course of this epidemic. We need to really get on track and ensure that people have equal and equitable access to services. We ensure that we remove all the barriers that prevent people from accessing services, whether you are a young person, whether you are a woman, whether you are a man, whether you are somebody who, because of your sexual orientation, you will not be left behind, and it is important that we bring that to the fore. We're also strengthening health systems, ensuring that health systems have the capacity and the ability to be able to take on patients and also be able to provide quality services for people. And this is what UNAIDS is galvanizing global solidarity around, and making sure that at least we have people, you know, who understand the situation, health policy makers, you know, ensure that we strengthen integration of services so that it's not just about HIV services. We are also talking about non-communicable diseases and issues of mental health, issues of access to services, putting communities at the center of the response. And that is what we are championing now, that people who are living with the disease, people who are impacted by the disease, you know, whether they are infected or affected, should be part and parcel of policy making, should be part and parcel of programming. And this is how engaging with government will then know exactly whether interventions that are being put in place are meeting the needs of the community. Right. So UNAIDS is pushing the idea that having communities at the center of the response is what will take to change the course of this epidemic. And this was what was demonstrated in the Global AIDS Conference, that communities should be at the center of the response. Else, we can have scientific development, you know, to change the course of this epidemic, but without the community at the center of this response, it will still not reach the people who really need it. All right. So thank you very, very much for giving me this big platform to be able to engage, and I hope that we would have more opportunities, engage the media, engage the legal fraternity, judiciary, to see how we can work collaboratively to create that enabling environment, addressing issues of stigma and gender rights. And I think we'll change the course of this epidemic in the Caribbean. This is the mandate I have been given by UNAIDS, and I hope I'll be able to work with you, working with civil society, working with communities, and working most importantly under the leadership of governments in the Caribbean to be able to keep people alive in the Caribbean.
Well, if this is anything to judge by, I think you're doing fine. Thank you very much. A man from Ghana, Richard Amplia. He's director based in Jamaica for UNAIDS at the multi-country office. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andy, for having me.
All right.
Great pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. All right, so let's begin our look around the region now. We go to Guyana, where they say the Public Service Union is pondering court action. We don't know about what, but news source Guyana tells us more.
The Guyana Public Service Union is preparing to mount a court challenge to force the government's hand to increase the salaries of public servants in light of the rise in the cost of living and other factors. During a press conference today, GPSU President Patrick Yard said the government is in breach of several local and international laws by failing to bargain with the GPSU on the way forward regarding increases in the wages and salaries for the public servants. Mr. Yard said the government has taken on a hypocritical posture. He explained that while in opposition, the government decried the Granger administration's move to increase the salaries of the executive. Yard said not only did they enjoy the same increase while in opposition, but they are doing so now, and they've totally disregarded the public servants. He called out the president for not matching his words with action as it relates to the nation's public servants.
In 2016, while in opposition, he challenged the AFC government as well as the vice president for his failure to utilize the collective bargaining process. And I will share with you also the newspaper article to that effect. Failure to utilize the collective bargaining process towards determining salary increases. But following his assumption as president in 2020, scant regard was paid to this legal requirement. In 2021, prior to the award of the miserable 7% across the board increase, the president proclaimed that his government was negotiating an outcome with the PSU. And we share that information to you. It was in the press.
The GPSU president also contended that the government appears reluctant to better the lives of public servants, noting that the administration continues to announce large budgets and draw down billions from oil sales, but public servants have not been benefiting.
This government, following its ascension to office in the year 2020, did nothing to alleviate the pains and sufferings of its workforce, other than to offer a minuscule cash grant of $25,000 in the year 2020. And a year later, a paltry award of a taxable 7% across the board increase, which taken as a whole could not absorb the impact of COVID-19 price increases.
Yard said the union was of the view that given the past blunders of the PP civic administrations, that this current administration would have been different.
Action of government appears discriminatory, given that the PSU has written several times since the year 2020 requesting collective bargaining on public servants' wages, salaries, and allowances, to no avail.
All right, so we go to Barbados now, where Barbados today is reporting on a decision by the National Housing Corporation there to try and meet housing demand in that country.
Locals being trained to construct low-income housing that will be provided under a partnership between the National Housing Corporation and Guyanese manufacturer Duravilla are expected to be able to complete builds in a week. That's according to manager of the Customer Service Department of the NHC, Roger Coppin, who said he expects hundreds of houses to go up over the next year and a half. He spoke to Barbados Today as the housing agency staged yet another viewing of the model homes on Thursday.
We are expecting 3-bedroom houses. We should have approximately 500 houses, hopefully between now and let's say the end of next year. But I know for sure that we're going to be having at least 30 by year end coming into Barbados. We have a mandate where we have to fulfill 2,000 houses within the first year. We are on the way, and we are looking forward to ensuring that the backlog that we have at National Housing Corporation will be looked after initially, because we have to get on that backlog. And we're going to be producing not only the house that you're seeing here, which is the Duravilla house, but we also have what we call steel frame houses, a new concept to Barbados coming out of China. And they're also viewing today for one of those houses as well.
From as early as 9 a.m., several people gathered in Queen's Park to view a sample of one of Duravilla's 2-bedroom timber and prefabricated structures. Several areas have already been identified for the houses, including Rivers Crescent, St. Philip, Searles Christchurch, Lower Burney's, and Cutting Road, Hackett Hall, St. Michael, Brighton, St. George, Bullen, St. James, and Concordia, St. Philip. Coppin is pleased with the overwhelming interest in the homes, and he says every effort will be made to speed up approvals.
With the applications, we're going to be having a number of board meetings coming up. So our board, the recommendations will be made to our board, and I'm quite sure that they are aware of what we are doing, and they will be on board to ensure that they they approve applications in a timely manner, because that is also part of the process. So each one of us would have bought into the process so that we can expedite matters in a timely manner.
All right, so that story takes us up to the point where we have to take a news break. On the other side of that, we come back with the in-house psychologist around here, Sule Joseph. He's promoting a program about trauma intervention. It's a voluntary program. We'll get to that and what it means, where it's coming from on the other side. And stay with us. This is AM Prime on a Wednesday morning.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. NTA accuses Minister Hines of blatant prejudice with emancipation statements. Attorney questions former prisoners' safety after prison release. Public Utilities Minister speaks on WASA transformation. And internationally, polio virus found in New York wastewater. Now for the details. The National Transformation Alliance views with deep concern comments made at Monday's Emancipation Day celebrations by Minister Fitzgerald Hines, advising that the Cabinet has agreed on plans to ensure the granting of applications for the use of state and/or agricultural land is balanced. In a release, the NTA said that Hines implicated not only himself, but the entire cabinet in a plan that, according to him, is already afoot to openly practice state-supported prejudice. The NTA says this sets a very troubling national precedent as it opens a Pandora's box where questions may be asked if similar criteria will be applied to create balance based on race on all national sporting teams or in the military or the police service or within CPEP teams and the granting of all state contracts. Attorney at Law Martin George has commented on the murder of Akili Charles, suggesting that his death reflects on the reality of the nation's safety and security. Charles, whose case saw the Privy Council give a landmark ruling that murder accused in remand can apply for bail, was shot multiple times outside his home in Diego Martin on Saturday. He subsequently died. Mr. George painted a picture where he labeled Charles being safer behind prison walls than within the public.
The sad reality is that it is a reflection on the state of our nation, in that a young man like Akili Charles was actually safer behind bars than he was on the outside. So, I mean, take a minute to digest that. As a murder accused, you are safer within the prison's walls than out in the public. So then what does that leave for us, the ordinary citizens? Where is our safety and security?
Meanwhile, George further lamented the Prime Minister's lack of details over his declaration of crime being a public health emergency.
Crime should be declared a public health emergency. And I'm trying to figure out, how is that going to be a solution to crime? You know, I mean, okay, so we declared a public health emergency, then what? But he seems fixated on the idea because I heard him repeat it another time. So, you know, it seems that somehow he has a bee in his bonnet about that, but he's not providing us the solutions, the tools, the framework to be able to say, well, okay, look, how declaring it a public health emergency is going to be the solution. I am still waiting to hear from the Prime Minister.
Public Utilities Minister Marvin Gonzalez is of the assumption that the Board of Directors at WASA should find no difficulty in knowing which managers would best serve a transformed WASA and those whom the authority should release. Speaking on WESN's AM Prime, Minister Gonzalez suggested that the working relationship between the authority's board and its managers over the last 20 months could serve as an assessment.
All of these things happened over the last 20 months, with the board working closely with a lot of these managers inside of WASA. So I don't assume that it is going to be a very difficult task for the board to know those managers that continue to have and will play a key role in the transformation of the authority. I think the board has a good sense as to who those managers are and perhaps who should not be part of the new transformed water and sewage authority.
However, he assures that those individuals who are to be released by the company could reapply for positions under the transformed corporation once they have the necessary qualifications.
It would only be fair, it would only be transparent to bring an end to the engagements of the 426 managers, giving all of them the same 426, as well as even people within the organization occupying junior positions, once they have the requisite qualification, skills, and experience, to apply for the 200 and something odd positions that will now comprise of the new executive and management structure of the organization.
In international news now, health officials say the polio virus was present in a New York City suburb's wastewater a month before a case was detected in July. The case, the first in the U.S. since 2013, was found in an unnamed patient in Rockland County. Officials say no new cases have been identified, and it is not yet clear whether it is actively spreading. Polio was largely eradicated from the U.S. by a vaccination campaign that began in 1955. Well, that was your News City Hour on WESN. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for watching.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered,
the conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to the program. Minutes from now, we'll be talking with the in-house psychologist around here, Sule Joseph. He's promoting a program for trauma intervention, a voluntary program to involve people between, well, young people, 6 or 7, up to 18 years old. We'll get to that moments from now, but we'll just take a look around what's happening in Grenada, Carriacou, Petit Martinique. That's the correct name of the country. The GIS there is saying that the Prime Minister says the country will see positive advancement when senior heads meet.
He was addressing the opening ceremony of a retreat for government ministers, cabinet staff, permanent secretaries, department heads, and senior managers at the Radisson Beach Resort. Friday's retreat was the first in a series to be held as part of the government's transformation agenda to create a new culture towards efficient public sector operations and service delivery. Honorable Mitchell is confident that the retreat is the first step toward formulating a plan of how government will pursue and achieve plans outlined in its manifesto.
We have to, as a public service, be able to convince members of our citizen that joining and working in the public service in whatever capacity is as good as, if not better, and a nobler cause than working in the private service, because you're working for and on behalf of your country with the ultimate aim of improving the lives of all of our citizens. So we want to forge a close, professional working relationship with the senior managers of the government. We are under no illusion that if that relationship is not a professional one, that if that relationship is not one, to quote the Secretary to the Cabinet, that sets goals that we work towards, that we will not be able to embark upon the transformation agenda that I am satisfied is the only basis upon which the citizens of Grenada give us the mandate to assume office.
Secretary to the Cabinet Ruth Elizabeth Rouse explained that the retreat will help government realize transformational changes within the public sector. These changes, she said, will be achieved through the utilization of technology, more robust policies, providing a supportive environment for increased diversity, and reshaping the workforce around government's core functions.
This retreat is the first in a series of sessions over the next few months to enable an understanding of how to achieve the government's agenda effectively and efficiently. It is against this backdrop that I implore and encourage you to seize this moment and the exercises involved so that when we leave here today, we are better equipped in the core areas that fosters and enables the metamorphic agenda of government, our citizens, and our country. We and the rest of the public service have a role to play in ensuring we make profound and lasting transformational changes in how we work and the expertise we involve in our work.
The retreat was held under the theme Transformation, an Imperative for Grenada's Advancement. It included sessions on principle and leadership.
All right, so it's called a Trauma Intervention Volunteer Program, and it's designed to work with youths who are directly affected by trauma of gun violence, whether they may be between the ages of 6 or 7 up to 18. The person behind that, counseling psychologist Sule Joseph, who is host of the program Psyched, if you're familiar with what transpires on this channel at all. He's with us now. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning, Andy. Thanks for having me this morning and getting me up at these ungodly hours.
All right. It feels good after a while. All right, so let's get a sense of what's behind it. Well, my first question would be, and it's a personal question, what is trauma? How do you define trauma?
Oh, good question. Trauma can be looked at in two major ways. It can be too much of something in a short space of time so that your body does not, or your brain does not get time to process it properly. So too much of something in a short space of time, or too little of something over a long space of time. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So if your mind does not have enough time to process the death of a loved one, for example, that can be traumatic. It upsets the everyday functioning, the homeostasis. Basically, how your brain functions on a day-to-day basis, or you function on a day-to-day basis. It can be something that just is a shock to the system. So, for example, the sudden death of a loved one or a friend, that could be traumatic because you weren't prepared for that. You didn't engage your mind. You didn't think about the possibility of it. You didn't prepare yourself mentally. That can be shocking to the system.
Yeah.
Something else that could be traumatic in terms of a long-term trauma could be the lack of love shown to you by a parent. So too little over a long space of time would be a parent probably not showing you the type of love and affection that you need, or a parent, who has maybe treated you like a barrel child, just send items down from whatever country they live in and never actually given you that care and attention. So too little care and attention over a long space of time can be traumatic, and that can cause issue as well. So it's either too much in a short period of time for your brain to cope with, or too little over a long period of time.
All right, let's talk about too much of something in a short space of time. And since this thing is aimed at addressing it in young people, what comes to mind immediately? We all saw that video of the 6 or 7 year old child who was scampering out of her mind, having seen her father shot to death in that street corner in Siparia. She is a prime sort of candidate for what you're talking about here, at least for that aspect of trauma.
Yes. So in this program that we would like to run, which is free, by the way, it's a free program that we're hoping to run, would be targeted specifically to those children who would have experienced gun violence. And with gun violence, of course, you can't prepare yourself mentally to witness somebody being murdered by a firearm, or the death of a loved one by a firearm. How do you prepare yourself for that? So that is sudden. That is too much in a short space of time for your brain and body to cope with. So therefore, it falls within the category of trauma. And yes, for those types of children, they would fall as perfect candidates for this type of program, because more so we're primarily looking at persons who would have witnessed or been around for. So that causes even further trauma, because you would have been part of the process or would have seen the unfolding of the traumatic incident. That, of course, could compound that trauma even more. So that child would be a perfect candidate, yes, for the type of program that we are hoping to launch. And we will be working with them, trying to, trying to provide therapy and therapeutic techniques and so on for them to cope better with the trauma and eventually, hopefully, manage it. Because the way trauma operates, trauma changes sometimes the chemistry of the brain and the functioning of your brain.
Does it make a difference what the source of it is, so that, you know, in this case, it could be the sort of impact of gun violence or being witness to that, as opposed to, say, parental neglect? Does it make a difference as to how it affects you?
It can. That's a complex response, not a complex question, but the answer to that is a bit complex, because there are numerous factors. You have to cater for the person themselves. People are different. Their responses to situations are different, so their responses to trauma would be different. How people think, thought processes are different. So how they react to different types of trauma will also be different. So that's a tough question. It's hard to say if one particular type of trauma will be more traumatic to one person than it will be to someone else, right? You can have secondary trauma. So you can have somebody who is watching a video of somebody, for example, either yesterday or day before, there was a shooting in Malik, allegedly. There was a video that came out about it as well. And I believe a child, an 11-year-old child or 7-year-old child or something, was shot as well in that shooting. Now, persons watching that video have messaged to say that has been traumatic for them. They weren't involved in the shooting. They weren't there. But just seeing it and imagining that this could be their child or something like this could happen to their child has been traumatic for them. So it's difficult to estimate and say exactly how trauma will affect everybody, but it's usually not in a positive light. It's usually something negative in terms of how it can affect you. It can even get to the state of debilitating, as in now you are fearful to even go outside. Maybe you're fearful to interact with new persons.
Yeah. So what led you to want to initiate this program on a voluntary basis?
Well, there were two things really. One, we would witness that there has been increasing gun violence in our country, and of course, with the increasing gun violence, there will be an impact upon our children. Our children will be impacted. Yes, I know other people will be impacted as well, but to quote Dr. Eric Williams, the future of our nation lies within the book bags of our children, right? So the children are the future, and I felt as though we needed to focus a bit more on treating with our children and how they have been traumatized by gun violence, witnessing murders and so on and that sort of thing. And I'm not just talking about criminal activities. There have been issues or videos and circumstances where you have maybe persons of justice, police officers and so on, shooting persons in communities or having these sorts of issues and children witnessing those shootings. Those children in turn will now be traumatized, and that type of shooting will impact upon their thinking and functioning. And what some of the studies would show is that type of witnessing that can affect their feelings towards law enforcement and so on, and can influence them in a very heavily negative direction towards anti-state sentiment and anti-law enforcement sentiment. So in truth and in fact, this program is not just trying to help our children, but it's trying to help our nation. by getting down into the root of some of the issues that might lead children into a life of criminal type activity.
All right, so how do people, if people are watching this and want to get involved, get their children involved and so on, what do you do?
Well, this program, part of what we've decided to do also came out of a partnership with the MP for Lamington, Mr. Adrian Leons, who reached out to myself and my company, the firm, and we had some conversations about some of these issues and how we would go about rectifying it. So I won't say on an individual level. What we're willing to do is to partner with communities. So if there's a community group that is willing to pull together enough persons who have been impacted and affected by gun violence and so on, if they have MPs or councillors and so on who are willing to do the groundwork and pull together these persons, then they can reach out and we'll be willing to work along with them. And when I say we, some of the persons will be working along with me, besides my team of the company, of course, will be interns, persons who are volunteering with the skill set, the necessary skill set to work with these children. So I'm inviting councillors, MPs, persons who have responsibilities for communities to reach out, and we can work along with you to do that. Send us an email.
How do they get in touch with you?
They can send us an email at that sulejoseph.associates with an S, so sulejoseph.associates@gmail.com. They can reach out to the station as well. I am a proud family member of the WESN family.
Yes.
They can reach out to the station and either request further information or partnership.
Right. So you say that it began from a discussion with the Member of Parliament for Laventille East Mover. I'm glad you raised that, because I want to come back on that issue about people who would have seen the police killings of these three gentlemen almost 2 years ago. And maybe, and well, of course, gun activity has become endemic in parts of that constituency. In other cases, there's a community that I used to live in that is riddled with it, Pelican Extension, and going towards Trumacac and so on. So that there are many people who probably could benefit from that. So the sense I have is that the MP sort of seizes the situation and wants to do something about it. So that is there a ground that is something is going to start there? I mean, has he committed to saying, well, getting people to come from his constituency to participate in this?
Well, for the first iteration, this first iteration of what we're going to do, yes, very much so, that we are partnering with the MP, and he has highlighted some children, actually, I think about 24 children who have been significantly impacted by the trauma of gun violence. I would like to say kudos to him for recognizing the importance of mental health and the mental health of children. And so with these 24, we're starting with 24 children who have been significantly impacted, and by impacted, I would say even witnessed gun violence and death through gun violence. And we'll be working along with these 24 children. So yes, we're partnering in this instance with the MP, and there's a catchment group already that we have that we're willing to work with. Of course, we're willing to repeat this, but as I said, it will be on a community type basis, so that either members of parliament can reach out or councillors can reach out, and of course they would have a stake in it, as in they would have to help identify some of the children. They would have to help us get a location, because this is of course for free. So they'd have to help us get a location. And if we're working with children and we're talking about the trauma and so on, we can't meet children and treat with all the layers of trauma that they have and not feed them. So there would need to be some kind of snack and so on that we organize. I'm also welcoming corporate Trinidad to come on board as well.
Yes.
It's not an individual responsibility; it is a national responsibility to work with our children and try to heal them from their traumas.
As well as NGOs.
Well, yes. I'm hoping that this will encourage more qualified persons to continue doing things like these, inclusive of NGOs, because we have a lot of NGOs with the capability and finances and financial backing to be able to support these type of initiatives, or maybe even do a version of this for themselves. So it has to, but it has to start somewhere. So it's starting with myself and my team, and the interns who will be joining me to do this program. And I'm hoping that this is a springboard for others to continue doing, or to jump forward and do their part, corporate Trinidad particularly, do their part, so that we can all work together and try to make up, to take a word from Donald Trump, make our country great again.
Yeah, be careful how you use that, you know. Yeah, but so this is like an incubator, and your hope is that it gets picked up by different professionals like yourself in different parts of the country, because there's almost no part of the country where this is not a phenomenon. Correct.
And it's a lot of work. It will require a lot of work, so that it can't be done by one person. It can't be done by one organization. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of free work. I know a lot of people cringe when they hear the word free, right? So it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of free work. And for it to be done properly, it needs investment and time investment and financial investment.
Yeah, so in this case, we're talking about in the incubation, we're talking about like the Mobile Community Center, or someplace like that.
Yes. So ideally, what we're looking at is using community centers, which is why ideally it would be, it would be important for persons in the community, so the MPs, councillors, those types of persons to be involved with us, because we can't do it alone, so that we can access some of the resources of the community, right? So that we can access those resources and then give those resources back to the people, right? That is really important. So yes, we're looking at using community centers and so on, and we have some really state-of-the-art ones now, actually, so we want to utilize them well.
Yeah, I want to ask you to respond to the criticism that we get from some people who look around and see, in the face of the violence and criminal activity in the country, they complain that we get to the point where we are numb because of it, and some people get criticized for that, or some people criticize what they see as the absence of passion in the face of wanton criminality and violence. You think that is a response, that is a safety sort of response from some people? We just don't know how to deal with it, and therefore we remain shut with anguish and terror in our heads?
All right, I'll answer that this way. Imagine you're standing in the middle of the road, you're trying to cross the road, it's at night, or maybe it's even the day, and a car comes dashing at you, and instead of running across the road in either direction to get away from the car, you freeze. You freeze and you look at the car, and the car is coming at you. Now somebody might argue that that is a very foolish thing to do, and why didn't you move? But again, you see, traumatic incidences, and that in itself is a traumatic incident, FYI. It might be low on the scale, but it still is. It's a major incident, something that is happening, a lot is happening to you in a short space of time, and maybe your brain just can't process it. We don't sometimes choose to have these reactions of numbness. Sometimes it's just so much and so overwhelming that our bodies and our brains can't process the information.
Yeah.
Right? And we just freeze. Now that's different from desensitization of violence, which can also happen. But sometimes we just don't know how to deal with it. And the best way we know how to deal with it is to pretend it just doesn't happen. Ignore it. Don't watch news. Try to stay away from it. And you know, we're the country of rum and roti and fat. So we party it away. We lime and drink and probably try not to think about it.
And that's how we deal with it. That's a coping mechanism. So how do people get in touch with you? All right.
So for persons who would like to, I think if there's information on the flyer, you can again email us at Sule, that's SULE, Joseph, JOSEPH .associates with an S @gmail.com. So they can do that. They can reach out via the email there. Or you can send a message. Send a message at 472-5522. feel free to do that. You can send a message via that. Phone calls don't always work, but a message, you can send a message, and I usually always respond to the WhatsApp message or text message.
All right, thank you very much, my friend. The Trauma Intervention Volunteer Program. Thank you very much. That's all the best with it. Thank you very much. Well,
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, man. Before we go, let's just ask you to watch this. A man is seen speeding on a roadway before escaping from a head-on collision. The person who was not injured, we just ask you to take a look.
Well, that was scary. Dear. I'm uninjured. I'm uninjured. Let me.
Not sorry.
Okay, no anger. No anger. Let's just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's just take this calmly. Do you think that?
Number, I'm sorry.
Do you think that this is recording?
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine.
I'm going to turn this off now.
Broadcast for this morning. We thank you for watching. We tell you can keep in touch with us here at AM Prime. You can check us out at WESNCC on all our social media platforms, and you could send your emails to amprime@wesncc.com. That will do it for us this morning. In half an hour from now, we go back to News on the Hour, followed by today's edition of Talking Point with Shah and Small. For now, I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.
WESN.